October 14th, 1943. 15,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. A German fighter pilot scribbled across the worn leather of his logbook, "Another mission, another kill." His 17th heavy bomber destroyed. A B-17 Flying Fortress spiraling toward the ground, trailing black smoke and hopelessness. Through the canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190, he watched the remaining bombers struggle to stay in formation. Their gunners fired wild bursts of .50 caliber rounds into empty sky where German fighters had been seconds ago. The math of air combat was simple and cruel. German fighters chose when to strike, diving from the sun and escaping before the bombers could react. Without fighter escorts, American bombers were just flying targets, slow, massive, and alone. That morning, 291 B-17 Flying Fortresses had crossed into German airspace to destroy the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. By sunset, 60 would never return to England. Another 17 would limp home, too damaged to fly again. The Luftwaffe called it a turkey shoot. The Americans called it Black Thursday. It became the darkest day in the history of the 8th Air Force. But neither side knew that this German victory would be one of their last. Within 4 months, everything would change. In late 1943, German fighter pilots had every reason to feel confident. Aces like Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of Adolf Galland, and Major Walter Dahl had turned the destruction of American bombers into a deadly science. They refined their attack tactics again and again, learning exactly how to break the bomber formations apart. The Americans believed their combat box formation, 18 to 21 bombers flying in tight, layered defense, would protect them. Each B-17 bristled with 13.50 caliber machine guns, supposedly covering every direction. But in real combat, the Germans found the flaws, blind spots in the nose, limited ammo, and something even more dangerous: fear. The impact of constant German attacks was beginning to show. Hermann Heinz Koch, commander of 5/JG-11, had perfected the deadly head-on attack, striking at the B-17's weakest spot, the front. On February 26, 1943, he shot down his first heavy bomber, a B-24 Liberator named Maisie. By October, he had destroyed 16 more. His method was exact and terrifying. Come in from 12 o'clock high, dive straight through the formation at 400 miles per hour, fire a 2-second burst at the cockpit and engines, then break away before the top gunners could react. The numbers proved the Germans were right to be confident. During the first Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission on August 17, 1943, the Luftwaffe shot down 60 bombers, 16% of the entire attacking force. Losses were so heavy that deep raids into Germany were stopped for weeks. When they tried again on October 14th, the results were even worse. 77 bombers were lost or written off, and more than 600 airmen were killed or captured in a single day. Major Gasp, commander of 2/JG-11, developed a new tactic called the company front attack. 8 FW-190s flying side by side, charging the bomber formation at once. Their approach flooded the sky with targets, overwhelming the bombers' defenses. The effect on American crews was devastating. Facing 8 fighters closing in at a combined speed of 600 miles per hour, gunners had only seconds to react. Many panicked and fired at empty sky. The real cause of America's weakness was simple physics. In 1943, no Allied fighter could escort bombers deep into Germany. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the main American escort, had a combat range of just 375 miles with drop tanks, enough to reach the border but not the heart of Germany. The twin-engine Lockheed P-38 Lightning could fly farther than other fighters, but it struggled in the freezing European skies. At high altitudes, its engines failed, and its controls sometimes froze solid. Because of this, American bombers had to fly the most dangerous part of their missions, deep over Germany, completely alone. German fighters simply waited beyond the range of Allied escorts, ready to strike with full force once the protection ended. Luftwaffe pilots called this point the golden moment. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, who scored 206 victories before his death in October 1943, described the tactic in recorded interviews. "We tracked the bomber streams on radar, calculating exactly where their escorts would turn back. The moment the little friends left, we pounced. The bombers knew it was coming. You could see them tighten their formations. This escort gap created a deadly math problem. A B-17 formation might face 4 hours of combat over enemy territory, but only 90 minutes with fighter protection. German pilots could attack, land, refuel, rearm, and attack again, all while the bombers were still fighting to get home. Some Luftwaffe pilots flew 3 or 4 sorties against the same raid, multiplying their impact. The development of the P-51 Mustang didn't begin in America, but with a British request. In April 1940, the British Purchasing Commission approached North American Aviation asking for more P-40 fighters. Instead, the company proposed building a completely new aircraft in just 120 days. The result was the NA-73X, which first flew on October 26, 1940, a remarkable achievement in speed and innovation. The first Mustangs, powered by the Allison V1710 engine, were excellent at low altitude, but struggled above 15,000 feet, exactly where bomber escorts were needed most. The RAF used these early versions for reconnaissance and ground attack, where their range and low-level performance were valuable. But the real transformation, the one that would change the air war forever, came from an unlikely partnership of American and British engineering that in April 1942, Rolls-Royce test pilot Ronald Harker flew a Mustang powered by an Allison engine and instantly saw its hidden potential. The Mustang's airframe was superb, smoother and more aerodynamic than even the Spitfire. It didn't need a new design, it just needed a better engine. Harker suggested installing the Rolls-Royce Merlin 61, the same powerful, 2-stage supercharged engine used in the newest Spitfires. By October 1942, the first Merlin-powered Mustang took flight, and the results were astonishing. Its top speed jumped from 390 to 440 miles per hour, and its high-altitude performance changed from weak to world-class. The Mustang's service ceiling climbed from 31,000 to 42,000 feet. This was more than an upgrade, it was a transformation. The combination of American mass production and British engine technology created something neither country could have achieved alone. What made the P-51B Mustang truly revolutionary wasn't just its speed or power, it was its range. 3 key factors made it possible. Exceptional aerodynamics from its laminar flow wing. Efficient fuel use with 184 gallons of internal fuel. Less than the P-47's 305, but in a lighter, more efficient airframe. The ability to carry external drop tanks without losing much performance. The Mustang's laminar flow wing, designed by North American's Edgar Schmud, kept smooth airflow further along the wing's surface than normal designs, cutting drag by almost 30% and saving fuel. While a P-47 Thunderbolt burned about 100 gallons per hour in cruise flight, the P-51 used only 65 gallons at the same speed. When 75-gallon drop tanks were added in early 1944, its combat range expanded to 650 miles. And with 108-gallon tanks introduced in March 1944, that range stretched to 850 miles, enough to reach Berlin, fight for 20 minutes, and fly back to England. No other single-engine fighter in the world could match this mix of range and performance. The 354th Fighter Group, known as the Pioneer Mustang Group, received the first P-51BS in November 1943. Based at Boxted in Essex, they were officially part of the 9th Air Force, but were immediately sent to escort the 8th Air Force's heavy bombers on long-range missions. Their commander, Colonel Kenneth Martin, had just days to retrain his pilots, converting them from P-47 Thunderbolts to the new Mustang fighter. Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Duncan, who would later command the 353rd Fighter Group, flew one of the first test flights and remembered it clearly. The moment I lifted off, I knew we had something special. The Mustang handled like a sports car compared to the truck-like Thunderbolt. It was fast, responsive, and most importantly, it could fly forever. The first P-51B combat mission took place on December 1, 1943, a fighter sweep over Belgium and France. Just a few days later, on December 5th, the Mustangs flew their first escort mission to Amiens. It was a short-range raid, more of a test than a full mission. 16 P-51BS accompanied the bombers, met no German fighters, but proved they could handle high-altitude escort work. Then came December 13th, the first long-range escort mission, all the way to Kiel, nearly 490 miles from base, a distance no Allied fighter had ever reached before. The psychological impact was immediate. German pilots who expected to find unescorted bombers over northern Germany were stunned to meet American fighters deep inside their own territory. By the final week of 1943, the 8th Air Force intensified operations, pushing the new fighter to its limits. On December 20th, P-51BS escorted bombers to Bremen, shooting down 3 German fighters without a single loss. The Luftwaffe, still using its old tactics of waiting for Allied escorts to turn back, was completely caught off guard because the escorts weren't turning back anymore. From a distance, German pilots often mistook the P-51B for the P-47, assuming they'd soon retreat. But when the Mustangs kept flying east, past the P-47's maximum range, confusion turned into alarm. Allied intelligence intercepted frantic German radio chatter. Controllers asking pilots to confirm the fighter types, unable to believe Allied escorts had reached so deep into Germany. Major Klaus Mayatusch, commander of 3/JG-26, realized the truth after a December 30th dogfight in which Mustangs chased his fighters all the way to their landing approach. He told his men, "The air war has fundamentally changed. Our sanctuary no longer exists." By March 4th, 1944, the world over Germany would never be the same. 25,000 feet above Brandenburg. Through breaks in the clouds below, the wide outline of Berlin was visible, the capital of the Reich, the heart of Nazi Germany, the city that Hermann Göring had sworn would never see enemy aircraft. But above it, flying in perfect formation, were 660 American heavy bombers, and around them, weaving in tight protective patterns, were dozens of single-engine fighters with American stars on their wings. The first American fighter escort to Berlin was more than a tactical success. It was a psychological shock, a direct hit to Germany's sense of invincibility. Colonel Donald Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group, led his 3 squadrons of P-51BS on this historic 1,100-mile round trip. His unit had received their new Mustangs only 4 days earlier, on February 28, 1944, and they had already achieved what Germany's leaders said was impossible. For the Luftwaffe pilots scrambling to intercept, the sight was unbelievable. They had always been told that Allied fighters could never reach Berlin. It was too far, beyond the range of any single-engine aircraft. Yet here they were, fresh, aggressive, and ready for battle, even after flying 500 miles. Meanwhile, the German pilots were already low on fuel just minutes after takeoff. What followed was fierce combat. The Luftwaffe sent over 200 fighters to defend Berlin, but instead of tired bomber crews, they met eager Mustang pilots with superior aircraft and the advantage of altitude. The 4th Fighter Group alone claimed 15 victories, but their greatest success wasn't the kill count. It was the number of German attacks broken up before they could reach the bombers. For American pilots, the P-51B Mustang was a dream come true, a revelation in fighter design. Captain Donald Gentile, one of the Mustang's top aces from the 4th Fighter Group, described his first combat flight. "The Mustang gave us everything we dreamed of, the speed to catch any German fighter, the maneuverability to dogfight with them, and the range to go anywhere the bombers went." The cockpit of the P-51B was small but smartly built. The pilot sat behind a powerful inline engine, giving excellent forward visibility. Unlike the older P-47 Thunderbolt with its bulky radial engine that blocked much of the view. And soon, the new P-51D, with its clear bubble canopy, would make that view even better. The later bubble canopy on the Mustang would improve visibility even more, but even the P-51BS greenhouse canopy already offered excellent all-around vision. Lieutenant Robert Powell of the 352nd Fighter Group remembered the sheer physical strain of those missions. 6 hours in a Mustang meant 6 hours on oxygen above 10,000 feet. Your mouth went dry from breathing oxygen, your back ached from sitting on the parachute and dinghy pack, and your neck hurt from constantly twisting to check for enemy fighters. But we had what we needed to get the job done, and that made all the difference. The appearance of Mustangs over Berlin sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe High Command. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring at first refused to believe the reports, until he saw gun camera footage from German fighters clearly showing P-51s over the capital. He supposedly said, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." Even if the exact words aren't fully confirmed, they perfectly capture the shock and disbelief among Germany's leaders. The tactical impact was enormous. Every part of Germany's air defense strategy had been built on the belief that central Germany was safe, a sanctuary beyond the reach of Allied escorts. Training airfields, aircraft factories, and assembly areas had all been placed deep inside the country for that reason. Now, the Mustang shattered that illusion. American fighters could strafe airfields near Prague, dogfight over Munich, and escort bombers to any target inside the Reich. Major Gunther Rall, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, understood what had happened. The Mustang didn't just extend the bomber offensive, it transformed it. We could no longer choose when or where to fight. They brought the battle to us on their terms, whenever they wanted. The Luftwaffe tried different tactics to fight back. They formed Sturmgruppen, special units flying heavily armed and armored FW-190s meant to punch through fighter screens and attack bombers up close. But these slow, heavy aircraft were easy prey for the faster, more agile Mustangs. The Germans also tried mass attacks, launching entire groups at once, but the Americans now had more fighters, better planes, and superior tactics to meet them head-on. Between February 20th and 25th, 1944, a period known as Big Week, the 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, a massive assault on German aircraft production. This time, P-51s provided full escort coverage from start to finish. In just 6 days, the Americans flew 3,300 bomber sorties and 3,673 fighter sorties, losing 226 bombers, but destroying over 500 German fighters. Even more devastating was the loss the Luftwaffe couldn't replace, its veteran pilots. The American strategy had changed. It was no longer just about bombing targets. Now it was about hunting the enemy in the sky. General James Doolittle, commander of the 8th Air Force, issued new orders in January 1944. Fighters were no longer to stick close to the bombers. They were to seek out and destroy the Luftwaffe wherever it was found. Captain John Godfrey of the 4th Fighter Group described the new aggressive tactics. We'd escort the bombers to the target, but once they dropped their bombs, we went looking for trouble. We'd dive to the deck, strafe airfields, and catch German fighters taking off or landing. The math of attrition now heavily favored the Allies. In January 1944, the Luftwaffe lost 1,311 pilots. In February, they lost 2,121. In March, another 2,115, many of them veteran aces with years of combat experience that Germany could never replace. Meanwhile, the Americans, though suffering losses of their own, could replace them easily, thanks to massive training programs turning out 11,000 new pilots every month. The P-51 Mustang represented more than just extended range. It was a symbol of American industrial and technological power. By late 1944, the new K-14 computing gun sight gave Mustang pilots a huge edge in combat. This gyroscopic sight automatically calculated the correct lead based on range and rate of turn, making deflection shooting far more accurate. The Mustang's 6.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, though less powerful than German cannons, had two key advantages: more ammo and a faster rate of fire. A Mustang carried 1,880 rounds total, enough for nearly 30 seconds of continuous fire. German fighters armed with cannons usually had ammo for less than 10 seconds. In a long dogfight, American pilots could afford to keep shooting. German pilots couldn't. Major Heinz Bahr, one of Germany's top aces with 220 victories, summed it up perfectly. The Mustang wasn't just another fighter. It was a complete weapons system. Everything about it was built for its mission. We had excellent aircraft, but nothing that combined all the elements so well. Behind all the numbers and statistics, though, was a deep human tragedy. The air war had reached a scale the world had never seen before. Young men on both sides, many barely out of their teens, fought desperate battles 6 miles above the earth, in freezing air that reached -50 degrees Fahrenheit. The lucky ones died instantly. Others suffered horrific burns, lost limbs to cannon shells, or bled to death slowly as their parachutes, full of bullet holes, failed to carry them down safely. Lieutenant William Wisner of the 352nd Fighter Group shot down a Bf-109 on March 8, 1944, and watched its pilot bail out. His parachute opened, Wisner said, but he was on fire. I could see him beating at the flames on his flight suit as he fell. There was nothing anyone could do. German pilot Walter Schuck of JG-7 described how the nature of combat had completely changed. In 1943, we were knights of the air, fighting bombers in what still felt like fair combat. By 1944, we were being hunted. The Mustangs followed us all the way down to our airfields, circled overhead while we tried to land, then attacked. There was no safety anywhere. The psychological toll on German pilots was enormous. Men who had been confident and proud in 1943 became hopeless and fatalistic by mid-1944. Censored letters home, later found in archives, revealed that despair. One pilot wrote in April 1944, "We take off knowing most of us won't return. The Americans are everywhere, always above us, always with more fuel, more ammunition." As spring turned to summer in 1944, the Mustang's long range made possible a strategic air campaign that crippled the German war machine, the destruction of oil production. Synthetic oil plants at Luna, Politz, and Brucks, once safely out of reach, now faced regular precision bombing raids under full fighter protection. The results were devastating. Germany's aviation fuel output dropped from 175,000 tons in April 1944 to 30,000 tons in July and only 10,000 tons by September. Training flights were first cut back, then stopped entirely. New Luftwaffe pilots were arriving at the front with just 50 total flight hours, compared to 300 to 400 hours for American pilots. General Johannes Steinhoff, commander of JG-7, described the crisis. "We had the world's first operational jet fighter, the Me-262, capable of 540 miles per hour. But we could barely fuel them. I watched helplessly as dozens of these superb aircraft sat idle while Mustangs flew freely overhead. Then came June 6, 1944, D-Day, and the total collapse of German air power. That day, the Luftwaffe managed only 319 sorties over France. The Allies flew 14,674. Over the invasion beaches, only 2 German fighters appeared. Mustangs and other Allied aircraft dominated the skies so completely that the entire invasion unfolded under a protective aerial shield, virtually untouched by German planes. Joseph Pips Priller, commander of JG-26, flew one of the only 2 German fighter sorties over the beaches on D-Day. His wingman, Heinz Wudersick, flew beside him. They made a single strafing run along Sword Beach, attacking Allied troops below. Later, Priller described the mission bluntly. It was suicide disguised as duty. They survived only because the Allied fighters were too stunned to react to the sight of just 2 lone FW-190s diving through the chaos. The Mustang's role after D-Day went far beyond just escort duty. It became an active fighter bomber, striking targets deep inside Germany. P-51 pilots became masters of train busting, shredding locomotives with their .50 caliber machine guns. A single Mustang could carry 2 500-pound bombs, or 10 5-inch rockets in addition to its guns, making it one of the most deadly and versatile aircraft of the war. Captain Charles Chuck Yeager, who would later break the sound barrier, flew P-51s with the 357th Fighter Group. On October 12, 1944, he shot down 5 Bf-109s in one mission, becoming an ace in a day. But Yeager also spoke honestly about the moral cost of the air war. "We went from protecting bombers to attacking anything that moved. We'd strafe trains knowing they might be carrying civilians. It was total war, and the Mustang gave us the power to take that war anywhere in Germany." Germany's answer came in the form of revolutionary jet fighters, the Messerschmitt Me-262 and the rocket-powered Me-163 Comet. The Me-262, capable of 540 miles per hour, was nearly 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51D. In the hands of skilled pilots, it could slice through bomber formations and vanish before the Mustangs could react. But even these technological wonders couldn't change the outcome. Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top aces, flew the Me-262 with JV-44 in 1945. He shot down 7 aircraft, but later admitted, "We were like a few tigers surrounded by hundreds of wolves." For every Me-262, the Americans had 50 Mustangs. And the Mustangs learned quickly how to hunt the jets. They would wait over German airfields, attacking the Me-262s when they were most vulnerable, taking off or landing. The jet engines of 1944 to 45 were fragile, requiring careful throttle control and long runways. The slightest mistake could cause a flameout. Lieutenant Urban Drew of the 361st Fighter Group used that weakness to his advantage. On October 7, 1944, he shot down 2 Me-262s by catching them in their landing pattern, low on fuel and unable to fight back. By early 1945, the math of air combat had turned hopeless for Germany. The United States had built 15,486 P-51 Mustangs during the war, with about 8,000 serving in Europe. At its peak in March 1945, the 8th Air Force alone had 14 fighter groups, over 1,000 Mustangs ready for battle. Against them, the Luftwaffe could field only 300 to 400 operational fighters on a good day, spread thin across the entire Reich. Many German planes never even took off because there wasn't enough fuel, and those that did were often flown by teenagers with barely any training. The results were brutal. By 1945, Mustang pilots were claiming 10 kills for every loss. Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer, commander of the 352nd Fighter Group, finished the war with 24 aerial victories, all in Mustangs. He summed it up simply. By 1945, it wasn't combat, it was execution. We'd find German airfields, circle overhead, and shoot down anyone who tried to take off or land. The Mustang had turned all of Germany into a battlefield. After the war, captured Luftwaffe officers spoke candidly about the Mustang's devastating effect. General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland wrote in his memoirs, "The P-51 was perhaps the most significant fighter of World War II. Until it appeared, we controlled the timing and tempo of air battles over Germany. After it arrived, we never regained the initiative." Major Heinz Nock, who survived the war with 33 victories, put it even more bluntly. The Mustang killed the Luftwaffe. Not the bombers, not the invasion, that fighter that could fly to Poland and back. We went from predators to prey in just 3 months. The most tragic stories came from the young replacement pilots who entered combat in the war's final months. Many had less than 60 hours of total flight time before being sent into battle against veteran American pilots flying superior aircraft. One captured German pilot recalled, "I flew my first mission in November 1944 with 55 hours of flight time. On my third mission, I saw Mustangs for the first time. They were everywhere. I knew then we had lost, not just the war, but the sky itself." The Mustang's impact went far beyond air combat. By giving the Allies the ability to launch deep raids into Germany with fighter protection, it made possible the systematic destruction of German industry. Oil production, the Wehrmacht's Achilles heel, collapsed to just 10% of its needs by March 1945. Germany's transportation network lay shattered, trains destroyed, bridges broken, and movement of supplies nearly impossible. The destruction of Germany's war machine didn't just come from bombs. It came from what those bombs stopped. With fuel plants destroyed and supply lines shattered, troops, supplies, and raw materials could no longer move. Factories still produced planes, but without fuel or trained pilots, those aircraft became useless steel shells. General Karl Spaatz, commander of U.S. strategic air forces in Europe, summed it up perfectly. The P-51 was the decisive weapon of the European air war. It made possible the daylight bombing campaign, the invasion of Europe, and the systematic destruction of German military power. But beyond the strategy and numbers, there was something deeper, a human transformation. German pilots who had entered the war in 1943 as confident, fearless warriors ended it as broken men, if they survived at all. Many remembered the exact moment they realized the war was lost. Almost always, it was the day they first saw Mustangs deep over Germany. Some Luftwaffe veterans went through an even more profound change, from enemy to admirer. After being captured, many were stunned by America's overwhelming industrial strength and the humane treatment they received as prisoners. They began questioning everything they had been told by Nazi propaganda. The contrast between what they had been taught and what they saw destroyed their faith in the ideology they had fought for. The P-51 Mustang marked a turning point in aviation history. Its laminar flow wing proved that sleek design could dramatically reduce drag and increase range. Its blend of British engine technology and American airframe design became a model for future international cooperation, a partnership that would later shape NATO and modern military alliances. The Mustang's unmatched range changed how the world thought about fighters. Before the war, fighters were seen as short-range defenders, tied to their bases. The P-51 proved they could be strategic weapons, projecting power hundreds of miles from home. That idea would influence everything from the F-86 Sabre in Korea to the jet fighters of today that can circle the globe with aerial refueling. The final statistics tell a staggering story. Total Mustangs produced, 15,486. Enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat, 4,950. Enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground, 4,131. Locomotives destroyed, 9,254. Combat sorties flown, 213,873. Combat hours logged, 1,344,200. Operational losses, 2,520. Kill-to-loss ratio, over 11-1, a record unmatched in aerial warfare. Yet the true measure of the Mustang's impact isn't just in numbers. It's in what it changed, the will of the Luftwaffe, the course of the war, and the speed of victory. The shift from German laughter at unescorted bombers to utter helplessness in the skies happened with stunning speed. The P-51 didn't just win air battles. It won the sky, and with it, it helped win the war. In October 1943, the Luftwaffe ruled the skies over Germany. They could shoot down Allied bombers almost at will. But just 5 months later, in March 1944, everything changed. P-51 Mustangs were now escorting bombers all the way to Berlin. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe was no longer an effective fighting force. By April 1945, it had completely collapsed. This wasn't a slow decline, it was a catastrophic collapse. The moment Mustangs appeared deep over Germany, the Luftwaffe began to crumble. Every lost pilot couldn't be replaced fast enough. Every destroyed aircraft meant fewer training flights for new recruits. And every successful Mustang escort mission gave Allied commanders the confidence to push their bombing raids deeper and harder into the heart of Germany. The numbers tell the story clearly. 1943, 2,967 German pilots lost. 1944, 12,037 pilots lost. 1945, January, May 4,238 pilots lost. Pilot experience dropped just as fast. In 1943, new pilots had over 250 flight hours before combat. By early 1944, that number fell to 150 hours. By late 1944, it was 80 hours. By 1945, only 40 to 50 hours, barely enough to survive a single mission. But the Mustang's greatest victory wasn't just in the sky, it was psychological. It shattered the myth of German technological superiority, and it proved that a democracy could outbuild and outfight a dictatorship. In 1943, German pilots laughed at American bombers. By 1945, they were refusing to fly against bomber formations protected by Mustangs. Young Luftwaffe pilots, raised on Nazi propaganda, couldn't believe what they were seeing. Everything they had been taught about racial superiority, German engineering, and American weakness was being destroyed before their eyes by the elegant, powerful P-51 Mustang soaring over their homeland. 40 years later, in 1985, former American and German fighter pilots met again at a reunion in San Antonio, Texas. The conversations showed how deeply the Mustang had affected both sides. Colonel Clarence "Bud" Anderson, who flew 116 combat missions in Mustangs and scored 16.25 aerial victories, sat across from Gunther Rahl, Germany's third highest scoring ace. Raising his glass, Rahl said, "To the P-51 Mustang, the fighter that won the air war. We had excellent aircraft, superb pilots, and we fought over our homeland. But you had the Mustang, and that made all the difference." Walter Schuck, who had flown both FW-190s and Me-262 jets, added quietly, "We went from laughing at unescorted bombers to fearing the sight of Mustangs in just 4 months. The Luftwaffe went from owning the skies to running for cover from Mustangs. No military force in history had ever faced such a total reversal." Former Luftwaffe General Johannes Steinhoff, his face still scarred from his Me-262 crash in April 1945, later reflected, "We laughed at your bombers in 1943 because we couldn't imagine America building a fighter that could escort them all the way to Berlin." He paused and added, "The P-51 Mustang taught us the danger of underestimating your enemy. You ask when we knew the war was lost. It was that day in March 1944, when we looked up and saw Mustangs over Berlin. At that moment, every German pilot knew the truth. We had already lost." The shift from German pilots laughing at unescorted bombers to hiding from Mustang fighters was one of the fastest and most complete turnarounds in military history. In less than 6 months, from October 1943 to March 1944, the Luftwaffe went from dominant to defeated, from predator to prey, from confident to condemned. The P-51 Mustang was the spark that ignited this transformation, but it stood for something even bigger. It symbolized American industrial power, the cooperation between democratic allies, and the power of innovation born from necessity, not ideology. German pilots had been raised to believe that democracy made a nation weak. Instead, they discovered a society that could unite, innovate, and outproduce any dictatorship. When they laughed in October 1943, their confidence was understandable. No single-engine fighter in history had ever flown far enough to escort bombers from England to Berlin and back. What they didn't anticipate was America's determination to solve problems, its ability to combine British and American technology, and its industrial might that could build thousands of advanced fighters in mere months. So when Mustangs appeared over Berlin on March 4, 1944, the laughter stopped forever. In its place came the painful realization that everything the German pilots had believed about their enemies, about their own superiority, and about the war's outcome, had been wrong. The P-51 Mustang didn't just win the air war. It shattered illusions, destroyed myths, and changed the course of history. The P-51 Mustang shattered myths and proved that true technological power in war doesn't come from ideology. It comes from industrial strength, teamwork across nations, and democratic innovation. The German pilots who survived never forgot that lesson. In their memoirs, interviews, and reunions, they all pointed to the same moment, the day the Mustangs appeared over Germany, as the day they knew the war was lost. Not the invasion of Normandy, not the fall of Berlin, but that moment when American fighters showed up where no one thought they could, flying deep into the heart of the Reich, escorting bombers with fuel to spare for combat. Even 79 years later, the P-51 Mustang remains the ultimate symbol of American air supremacy in World War II. The plane that silenced the laughter and ended Germany's control of its own skies. The German pilots who laughed in October 1943 learned by March 1944 that they had laughed too soon. By May 1945, most were no longer alive to regret their early confidence. In the end, this story is a timeless warning, a lesson about the danger of underestimating one's enemy, the power of industrial democracy, and how a single weapon system can change the course of history. The Mustang proved that in modern war, courage and skill, while essential, are not enough. Victory belongs to those who can produce the most, train the best, and innovate the fastest. The transformation was total, irreversible, and devastating. The laughter was gone, replaced by silence. And across the skies of Europe, the P-51 Mustang had written its name forever as the fighter that ended the Luftwaffe's dominance, and with it, Nazi Germany's final hopes for victory.